Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Weird. Interesting subject, this one, because today I'm going to touch on a subject that people really don't like talking about. In fact, the very subject matter is a little bit controversial, but let's get on with it because today we're talking about death. Would you study death? It's such a terrible subject that most people shy away from it their entire life. Just consider for a moment that the populace has been convinced over millennia that death is the ultimate horror. But what if death and the afterlife is actually not something to fear, but something wonderful that should be studied and better understood? Even if you started studying death today and continued for weeks or months or even years, you wouldn't even come close to the understanding that the ancient Egyptians had of this subject. They studied death for over 3,000 years. The combined effort of the most intelligent people of that enlightened society studied one subject for thousands of years. Just consider the understanding. And as a result, those Egyptians, they had a unique understanding of death. You see, once you understand that death is not finite and that you are reborn and go on and on for eons, the concept is not so frightening. But then there's this thing called the ego, and the ego is our connection to possessions in this three-dimensional realm that we perceive as waking reality. When you die, you can't take it with you, and will have to sever all connections to things and people in this life. As the ego is the only thing that's attached to things, then one should attempt to kill the ego. Allegorically speaking, that might be what Christ dying on the cross or the third degree of masonry is trying to tell us. Kill the ego. Let your ego die so you can truly live. And to kill the ego, you need to give up all possessions and ties to material things. Forget pride and selfishness and work to help others. Make that your humble, possessionless work. Now, the Egyptians, they understood reincarnation and the death of the ego, and as such, they did not fear death. They even worked the ego into the Book of the Dead, where the heart of the deceased is weighed in the scale against a feather. The person with the heavy heart was the person with the heavy ego, a lesson and a warning for Egyptians to learn in life. And don't swallow for a moment the perpetuated lie that Egyptians were uneducated Luddites in the Stone Age, because they just were not. They managed things that this so-called modern society of slaves could only dream of. Feats like building pyramids, something that we almost certainly couldn't do today. And we couldn't, even if we got the combined effort of all nations, we just couldn't do it in the social structure and economic climate that we have. And even if today we did manage to build something like the Great Pyramid, we'd likely not be enlightened enough to encode into it the very secrets of nature, as the Great Pyramid is encoded into its very shape and size, the sacred geometry, the speed of light, the distance from the Earth to the Sun, the location of the equinoxes, pi, phi, and scaled up, the Great Pyramid is an exact scale model of the Earth. And these are only a few things that we know about. You see, the Great Pyramid is a three-dimensional hall of records. There's no writing on the walls inside intentionally because the knowledge is encoded into the very structure of the pyramid. It's made of stone to stand firm forever, waiting for the enlightened person to come along and figure it out. And these same people, they studied death for 3,000 years or more. There's a truth behind death, so wonderful and so powerful that it cannot be given to all people, for the fabric of this modern matrix would collapse around the magicians who hold mankind under the most powerful of psychological spells. Words are power. Words are magic. That, my friend, is why they call it spelling. Do not fear death. Study and understand what your ancestors knew and embrace the majesty of a change, every bit as beautiful as birth. To quote the Kabbalion, death is not real, even in the relative sense, but it is but a birth to a new life, and you shall go on and on and on to higher and still higher planes of life for aeons upon aeons of time. The universe is your home, and you shall explore the furthest recesses before the end of time.
I know it's a difficult subject, but I hope you enjoyed it and it started to get you thinking because perhaps, unlike like we're all told, death isn't something to be terrified of. And if we can understand that there's reincarnation and we will continue and that energy that is inside us cannot be destroyed, then there's nothing really to fear. And yes, we can all be a little bit upset and afraid and angry even that we've got to sever our ties with our relatives and our friends and our possessions and our house and our home and all of the things that we've accumulated. But if we destroy the ego while we're still alive, we don't need any of those things. And I suppose one final note is I read recently about an Italian priest who had spent 60 years in Africa as a missionary. And after 60 years, he was retiring and going back home to Italy as a very old man, 80 years old. And after 60 years of helping others and spreading the good word, all he had, all of his possessions, was two small bags. And he waved goodbye and left. No ties, no stress, no nothing. There's an example of somebody who's not afraid of death because he's done good all of his life and he's got nothing but two small bags of possessions to let go of. But if you're a multi-millionaire with a super yacht and a massive family and loads of friends and loads of money, and then you realise you're dying and you're going to lose all that, it's quite a bad thing. So, lesson to be learned. Understand reincarnation's a thing and destroy the ego. Help others while you're here and go on and do good deeds. I'm Steve, this has been Bright Weird. Thanks for watching.